Text. Leading with Data and AI.
Okay. So Michael Taguchi is the Chief Strategy Officer at eResources, and digital strategy and transformation company. He has over 25 years of experience driving innovation for universities, nonprofits, and mission-driven organizations. His work spans diverse initiatives at institutions like Stanford University, University of California, and Rutgers University. And now I'll turn it over to Michael for his presentation.
The CIO's Playbook for Institutional Transformation.
Hey everyone, and thank you, Dave, for the introduction and helping walk me through all the virtual presentation angles that we have. I feel a little sad and missing out to not be in person with you. Like I should have been rushing to get a drink or bathroom or talking too long in the hallway with somebody. But I hope everybody's having a good conference and has had some great sessions. As Dave mentioned, I work at a company called eResources. We work not only in higher ed, but with nonprofits, corporate philanthropy, kind of all across the map, any place where there's digital strategy, transformation, AI, and automation needed. And so I was really excited to learn about this conference and join and be able to present some of our experiences, our findings, and hopefully provide some insight and recommendations. And for any of you that are interested in connecting in a professional capacity, find me on LinkedIn or just send some emails. Would love to chat and find out about, what you're experiencing, out there. So without further ado, I'm gonna start things off. Kind of already went through this. So it's listed as a CIO's playbook for institutional transformation, but this is really something designed for, you don't have to be a CIO, anyone in technology or anyone that has to deal with AI automation or transformation at any level. I think this is going to be applicable for you. And so we're going to try and go through some of those and easily skip through this exciting stock photo picture of myself we've got here. So about the session. Reframe is the most important word, I think, from our side of it. AI, we could spend multiple hours talking about agentic this, orchestration that, generative this, kind of get into rules, policy, and the 8 billion tools that are out there. But that's not the way that we want to approach it for this particular session. I'm looking to take this conversation and turn it into a leadership conversation, one that emphasizes communication, and one that doesn't look at it from a purely technical standpoint. That's the way projects always were. Leadership, regents, deans would come and say, give me WordPress, give me HubSpot, give me a CRM, whatever they might say. You can't say that now because whatever it is that you've mentioned could be potentially out of date, and there's so much innovation and so much like rapid change right now that this really isn't about technology projects anymore. It's about the culture that you have. It's about having not just a roadmap, but a roadmap that has the capability to have flexibility built into it, to have experimentation. And so you can have all of those things. They're great goals and principles to have, but they only work if you have strong leadership, if you have commitment to those things, and you have a plan to execute them. So we're going to work on reframing this and treat this as both the leadership as it relates to technology and how we've implemented that at other institutions, and what lessons we've learned and how we can potentially roll that out at places that you might be at. So a little table setting. I know you live this stuff every day and you're very well aware of it, but it's always important to have some inherency of things. The why are we here? We see everywhere we go institutions under increasing immense amounts of pressure. There are budget shortfalls and fights over funding. There are federal grants that are being yanked. The student population has changed immensely in terms of what they're looking for, how they perceive the value of things, and admissions and schools are trying to adapt to those changing expectations. There was a lot of technological revolution around the last 5 years, things people did for COVID, things they did after, and now you have all of these older legacy systems that have been built, and you combine that with the rapid advancements that are happening right now, and that's a huge challenge. It puts leadership, it puts directors, it puts CIOs in a position where you have to essentially reshape your workforce and change all of this on the fly. And that's hard enough as it is. Doesn't matter if you're in corporate or what a vertical you're in. If you're in higher ed, that kind of change is sometimes an anathema to what people are really looking for. And so there's just a lot of challenges there. I want to talk a little bit specifically about three of the risks we see, that kind of fall under this. The first is student expectations. Again, from our side, we look at it with the student as a partner of the university, a customer, someone that needs to be the audience that we're trying to communicate to, and they're the stakeholder that helps keep the blood flowing, keep the engine running, keep the money pouring in from a revenue standpoint. And it's also the mission to serve them, to educate them, to provide them with the careers and outcomes that they're hoping to get out of attending the university. And so, some of the data we see, like that's another conversation that we could do data on higher ed and students for the rest of the afternoon or evening if we wanted to. The ones that really stand out to me, especially in comparison to where, some adults are, 9 out of 10 folks, students using AI for schoolwork and personal life, over 70% recognizing, and this is a growing number from all of the trends I see, they understand it's going to be critical to their careers. But and more than half of them have a concern that they're doing this without really any guidance, any way to navigate it, and they don't have confidence that their schools, whether it's from the faculty level, the leadership level, really know how to provide it. And that creates an issue where you start to wonder about the value proposition. Again, in the context of funding being challenged, greater competition for the pool of students that are there. These students have changing expectations, and we have to find ways to meet it. And so we frame this not as the technology about it, but how do we keep the institution healthy? How do we keep it viable? And the IT component of that is a huge success. It's not really an isolated department. It's something that has to be immersed into every part of the student life, the faculty teaching, the administrative professionals. So the second risk we've got is the accumulated technical debt. This is really the biggest challenge that I've seen it doesn't matter if it's where I was a couple of weeks ago or where I was 15 years ago, the technical debt, that there are siloed teams, whether it's even within a department or against departments competing against each other. Everybody kind of has their own little fiefdom. The biggest problem with this, other than it sort of creates this weird Lord of the Flies dynamic in some ways where people are wanting to hold on to control of things, it creates inefficient workflows. There's a lack of collaboration that exists. And that may sound like not too terrible of a thing. Everybody's kind of doing their own, working their own way. It's not helpful from that collaborative environment because it means you don't have the kind of data that you are going to need. It means you don't have the kind of seamless delivery of services to students. Another reason the silo teams is a huge problem is just the ad hoc use of tools and platforms. We see this all the time where groups are finding like, oh, well, I'm going to use this for email marketing, or I'm going to use this to save my data or my database. We're using Google Sheets for this. We've got Microsoft Teams for that. And so on down the road. And that's played itself out in an even worse fashion as AI has become more prominent because there's the guidance, the governance, the strategy is constantly feels like the sand is shifting beneath us, and it's very difficult it's not as simple as saying like, well, let's just use X tool the way it would have been like, we're going to pick Microsoft Word or we're going to pick Google Email. There are too many options out there, and there's a lack of sort of focused leadership to make some strategic choices about which direction we want to go in. I mentioned a second ago, and this is really, to me, data is the gold that allows leadership to be effective. Having business intelligence and having a framework for that is what allows you to understand where you're successful, where you need to improve, where you may need to cut your losses. And if you don't have that data, that's really the thing that could hold you back the most from being successful, from modernizing. So I'm going to talk a great deal about that just in terms of what are the implications of that and how do you solve that problem? Because one of the implications there is the idea of the visibility, the performance, and what you see from all of your departments and from your teams. If you don't know who's being inefficient or you don't know who's being ineffective, There's no way for you to gather good information about where your resources, which are now increasingly limited, where should they be targeted. You don't know where there could be more workflow efficiency, where you need to add staff or reduce staff. So, and I think all of that silo teams, all of those individual platforms, the lack of data and the inability to make those decisions means it entrenches people in the idea of a resistance to innovation. And so they start thinking, again, less about their mission, less about their job description, and more about, well, this is the way I do things. I don't want to change. The AI stuff is scary. I could lose am I going to lose my job? There's just all those things that are sort of embedded into the culture of the way these things get approached. And so we think that ends up creating this, sort of vicious circle, or what's listed here as self-reinforcing negative loop, where all these behaviors, absent good leadership and communication, tend to reinforce themselves.
Governance and compliance.
So the third risk area is the governance and compliance, and this is one of the most thorny areas, where it feels like we used to help groups write policy, and now it feels like as soon as the ink is dry, they need to be revised, and so it's really like a minefield that we try and help groups navigate, and you know what the stakes are. Like, there are regulatory, financial risks where lawsuits, litigation are problems. The reputation, in terms of the credibility that your university has, if you lose that or if it's diminished, it becomes a huge problem. We know just security and accessibility are areas where it's a constant focus to make sure that data privacy, PII, whether you're meeting standards for SOC 2 or ISO or NIST from an accessibility standard, WCAG 2.2, AA or AAA, like all of these things are, kind of mixed into a complicated cocktail. And when you're trying to look at them through the lens of these AI platforms, it's extremely hard to put together policies. And so we try and later on talk about some of the solvency mechanisms we've put together in order to address them. The last one, just the idea of the AI adoption. And again, if you don't have these policies, what does that do to the academic integrity of the university, the privacy of the students and the information that's there, and just the equitability of the policies themselves, because it's so prone to bias and other problems of the decreased inclusion. So these, in particular, the litigation component, those are not like problems to solve. Those are existential challenges that we want to make sure are met head on. So they're always looking at all of our AI and our automation and our transformation through this lens. So it's a great storm cloud that's kind of over our head. How do we get to sunnier territories? I want to talk a little bit about lessons learned, case study. In the case study, I want it to be instructive. I was at a conference in Las Vegas this summer, and the case study seemed like 20 minutes of patting themselves on the back and kind of talking about great things they did. That's not what I want to do here, in particular, because I think case studies in higher ed, you kind of have to make it's the before and after picture, and you want the before picture to look as bad as possible and the after picture to look as sunny as possible. And I don't really think that that's the way it works. It's not linear, point A to point B. It's something that's continually happening. But from our end, one of the places that we have helped groups is in accessibility services and disability centers, and within the University of California system. And so we came to them looking at digital transformation, AI, and automation. And here's what they were faced with. And I'm sure it is the same wherever you're at. Accommodations, the growth is insane. It's not just smaller disabilities and things like that. It's employee accommodations. It's testing centers. It's you go down the line. The volume of them are just exploding. This particular university, they had a tool, but there was lots of manual and inefficient processes. I'm sure you're familiar with that. We found folks that were copying and pasting stuff in spreadsheets all day. They had stuff in their individual emails instead of in audit trail places that were necessary. Again, they were also heavily siloed, where you had a housing department, a parking department, a testing center, a testing department. All of these were offering accommodations, but there had no connection to them. And that opened them up to just a great deal of compliance risk. When we did security audits with them, there were a lot of vulnerabilities and weak spots that we needed to patch up. And the most important piece, again, I come back to data is gold, is that their data wasn't consistent or it wasn't validated. And this was at multiple layers. Even within the campus, within their departmental units, they were counting things differently, and there was no way for anyone in leadership to be able to provide a consistent, integrated look at any of the data. And then within the UC system as a whole, this was also the same thing, where each were individual centers, which all kind of providing the same services. They couldn't count things the same way in terms of like, how did you serve, who did you serve, how quickly did you serve them? There was no way for them to get a look at this across either the campus, across the departments, or across the sort of system as a whole. So using digital transformation, building some AI tools, some platforms, streamlining workflows, automating processes, what were we able to do? And these are the kinds of goals we're looking for any kind of transformation or AI project. Most importantly, save time, reduce manual work. A tool is not an AI project is not going to be have a success metrics if you're not reducing the manual amount of work. The ROI that we look for is the most important to us, the most valuable, and I hope everyone does in some sense, is the staff's time. How do you get them back to, saving 10, 20, 30% of their day from tasks that they don't need to do? It doesn't matter if it's sending emails that could be automated. Again, it doesn't matter if it is spreadsheets, working with data. All of these folks could be serving students. They could be doing other important tasks that are more towards the core mission of the university and more towards their actual job description, as opposed to kind of what we would call manual labor of the technology side. They found measurable ways to have better delivery of services to the students, which increase the student experience. And maybe most importantly, in some senses, faculty satisfaction was high. I always find that to be the most difficult one to achieve, as there are some faculty that can be more challenging on technology, I guess is the diplomatic way to put it. We were able to show better on compliance. I mentioned the audits, reduction of risk, and the collaboration and integration across the departments. This was something that we had really focused on, interviewing stakeholders, working with them to make sure we found where were their roadblocks, where were there ways that they could work more smoothly together to clean up their workflows. This all helped us from mindset and culture shift in order to get people into that collaborative environment, to get people understanding how to connect the technological changes to the mission at hand, to provide more value to students, to be more effective in the delivery of what they were doing. And obviously, since we're talking about accessibility, disability centers, the ethical adoption component, we were always looking through an accessibility framework, always looking to make sure that the tools or the solutions or features we were putting in place were something that had strong governance, strong policies, and strong rules with them. And so, my lesson learned there is that being able to do this in a measurable way, having the data to be able to show it, it provided an immense level of support to directors, to the associate deans, to folks that were dealing with boards and regents and budgets. They were able to show our team was this much faster. We served this many more students, because no one is really getting budget to hire more people. They're asking everyone at a university to do more with less in this era. And so that is where, when we're thinking about the ROI and what a CIO wants to see, we want to see more efficiency, better effectiveness, more work on core mission in order to make the dollars stretch further. And that last piece, that's that trusted data. The trusted data is the way it's important. It's not just data, it's trusted data where it's consistent, it's validated, and it's working across multiple departments and systems. So that allowed them to have the business intelligence to make good decisions moving forward.
Okay, how did we do this? I was told there would be a playbook.
So that's my case study. Those are my lessons learned. How? What was the in between? There was obviously no fiat wand to get from here are all the problems to here are the solutions. And I think the description had playbook in it, so we'll try and put together a little bit of a playbook for you as well.
Leadership.
So I mentioned at the top, we're framing this from a leadership standpoint. We're looking at it not as tools, not as can you use Claude or ChatGPT, not as can you build your, create your own LLM. Let's start from the leadership standpoint. The idea that this transformation for a leader, it has to be part of a broader communication strategy. And the technology is your force multiplier to make that strategy be executed in an effective way. And this is where we're kind of infusing a bit of story brand, if you're familiar with that concept in it, the idea that there's a hero of every story. And the hero is not you, the leader. The hero is the staff member that is, working 50-hour shifts, but doesn't have time to get to the meaningful work. It's the faculty member that is drowning in, administrative work and doesn't understand how to use some of the technology or how to adapt to their, changing student needs. Or the students themselves, who are the stakeholders who are wondering if they're, getting the value out of the education that they need. It's going to prepare them for the career that they want. We need to frame everything with them as the heroes. I wrote technology is just the tool. I mean, it's a critical element, but it is just the tool that these folks will use, and you as the leader are the guide that are going to help the hero find their place in the story. So, kind of building on that, I think there are, in this competitive environment, like there are going to be winners and losers. Like I could throw up data slides of there are less schools than there were. There are schools that are closing. There are schools that are cutting budgets and programs. So there are going to be winners and losers in the competitive environment. And we look at those as who are the institutions that, rather than making it tool-centered or system-centered, making it a person-centered solutions where they're implementing transformation, they're implementing AI, they're implementing automation. And folks are not thinking of themselves, particularly the staff, as it's just the circumstances, the budget has been cut, the changes that are being applied, like they're being wronged somehow in this by being forced to change. We want them to think of it as they're the ones that are helping create this transformation. So we think of that as the first bullet as bringing alignment. It's not disrupting. It is disrupting in the sense that like you have to change, but that change is good and that it brings you in greater alignment with the mission of your department or your organization. We look for our leaders to make sure that they have found champions at every layer of the implementation and make sure that they have buy-in, because adoption is not going to be like you can cut the ribbon and launch something, but if you don't have champions that are pushing it and making sure people are accountable to it, it's not going to be effective. We may want to make sure we're communicating to people like this isn't about the change is not punishment. The change is not about being replaced. It's about this meaningful, mission-driven work that you signed up to do and us giving you your time back in order to actually focus on that. And so that is the framing that we've been using from a leadership level in order to ensure staff understand what they're doing and want to buy in. And so, my last note on leadership as it relates to people, I love that you win with people. It's something that we say a lot around here. And we kind of go with bad process can be fixed, bad tool can be replaced. Wrong people or culture, that's fatal. And I love that idea in that all of the other slides we're talking about the way we want to encourage and empower people. You are going to encounter challenges though. I mean, like the resistance to change, very real. Tribalism, siloed departments, very real. Employees are, some do not have the skills or going to need to be trained. So they need that support. Some jobs are going to have to be completely rewritten because they're not necessary in the way that they were before, but that doesn't mean that the employee can't be effective in a different role. And the last point of something we run into a lot is that some of the best workers you have might actually be a hindrance to the adoption because they are so effective at doing it the way they are used to doing it. And it feels like they shouldn't need to change or they don't want to change. And so getting them to buy in, getting those A-level people who might be a little bit stubborn to buy in is another crucial part of technology leadership. So the way we close that part of it is just the idea, again, empower your staff, have them be solving and working on problems that are closest to them, but make sure it's fitting into that overall integrated vision. And we often say just pick one, pick a workflow that could you see areas for efficiency. Find small wins, and those tend to build on themselves at a macro level across an institution, at a micro level, a department or team, where you could be saving time and money.
Communication is key.
So at the top, I said, we need a communication strategy. And some of this, while straightforward, I think building a plan around these ideas, like if you are doing digital transformation, if you're implementing AI, if you are requiring automations, like what is the vision for that? Are you treating it like complex technology, or are you explaining how it's going to make the team, the staff, the work more effective, make the students, happier, more satisfied, better learners? Um, be transparent about plans and goals. This is something that we always preach, just the idea of the more information is better. I think a lot of institutions do a good job of it, but they sometimes don't reinforce it or stick to it once the initial kind of launch or things start to change. Accountability, extremely critical, both at the leadership level, at the director level, to ensure that people understand this isn't, we want to make sure that people are bought into it and that there are consequences if there are not. We've talked a couple of times about the idea of collaboration and, whatever incentives are provided for the employees. Like if we're trying to get data into an LLM build, like how do we collaborate to make sure that the chatbot that we build from it is something that can help, admissions and different programs, make sure that those collaborative environments, the data sharing and data consistency are something that are at the top of the list. And again, reinforcing, always tying this back to the mission and to how it helps the person be a hero in the story. So, and this is kind of our secret sauce and communication formula. Talked a little bit about the importance of like these barriers exist, but how do we create resilient staff and how do we build sustainable trust with all of our different audiences?
Create your playbook.
So, since we've got the leaders kind of on board, how are we going to create this playbook? And the first for me, these are my non-negotiables, but they're not necessarily the ones you might pick. And so what are your must-haves? What are the things that are part of the mission, that are part of your, sort of charge as an employee? For me, user experience, holistically speaking, like every audience segmentation, I want to interact with in a particular way and give them the best possible set of outcomes. I want the best, most consistent, most validated data and business intelligence to make good decision making. Something has to be secure and accessible. Anything that we create has to meet those two things. Otherwise, DOA. And of course, governance policy and making sure it's ethical. As university, like this isn't a corporate environment. This is a university. It's got standards that are extremely high in terms of needing to be both approachable, but also meet the policy standards, ensure that there's safeguards and sort of risk is mitigated. So from our side, we don't use templates for our projects, and I hope that you don't either. I hope that any playbook I give you, any playbook anyone gives you, any set of recommendations, like they need to be tailored for your unique needs, your specific teams. There are best practices. Maybe they get you 60, 70, 80% of the way, but the thing that's going to be most crucial is your ability to understand your team, your staff, your student body, your faculty, and be able to find the solutions that are going to work best for them. So that's when you're doing your must-haves and non-negotiables. Always be, you're going to know those things best and be able to specialize and customize them. So we've got our must-haves and non-negotiables. Now we're establishing some process. I like to say this way, that AI is a catalyst. It's a strategy amplifier. But that only works, again, when you've aligned it to your mission, to your culture, and to your governance. We kind of follow these 4 steps. It's the type of thing you could see sort of in the circular, like you start that process with an assessment and an audit. What is there? Give me the lay of the land. Once you've done that, you are designing and implementing, executing. It doesn't matter what the tool is. Does not matter what tool we're talking about. You need design and implementation. Number three is really the most important part of the process to me, the automation and streamlining. That's where you get into the goody workflow pieces that are going to create that time savings, to create that ROI for you. And one of the things I mentioned this a little earlier, the environment we're in now, the era we're in now, 6, 12, 18-month roadmaps don't really exist anymore. You are in a continuous loop of modernization. And so the idea of analyzing and optimizing is something that you have got to sort of put yourself in a position to be able to gain feedback quickly, because you'll need to know what's working and what isn't much faster than you would have before. Even something that's like waiting for, from implement January 1 and check it during the summer and change it in the fall, even that sometimes seems too slow. So we're always in using these kind of 4 steps and using them as a continuous loop. So one more point I wanted to make about that loop is there's a lot of contradiction in it. And what I mean by that is AI requires agility, automation requires innovation, and all of the stresses and pressures I mentioned, they require urgency. So those things are like frenetic, whereas I'm also saying we need steady leadership. We need flexibility, and we need to build momentum, starting small. And only you, the person creating this playbook, the playbook for yourself, knows how to tailor it to use those sliders, balance it for your own department, balance it for your own university. But keep those things in mind, that you're constantly trying to both run fast, but also keep steady while you're doing it.
Governance and ethical AI.
So we talked about the communication component of it. We've got, leaders that are creating plans. We've got steps in the process. What about the governance? This is, when I talk to folks, the policy, how to manage this sort of beast, all the audits that can come with it, how to make sure it's done ethically, concerns about inequities and bias. These are things that are very real challenges, and they require the collaboration across legal. They require your CIO, your CTO. They require all parts of the university in order to craft a policy. And again, be able to you can't write it in pen. You got to write it in pencil and be ready to adapt it. So we're talking about ways to safeguard your academic integrity, to build the trust amongst the students, to ensure equitable execution of all your policies, and safeguard the privacy as well. Things that we've done at other universities that I could recommend: doing readiness assessments, the cross-functional communities, and the assessments of how tools could work or will work if they are used by the university. Having strong acceptable use policies, that is one of the most important. Having an inventory of everything that is being used. Over on the other side of this list of bullets, the rogue implementations is one of my favorite, and it gets back to the idea of there are some employees that they want to have space to experiment and they need that, but we also can't have teams or departments just implementing whatever they want without any guidance or any sort of tie to the rest of the vision. The responsible review, sort of being able to make sure that all of the AI tools that are there are following the guidance that you have. With that guidance that you go, and again, per audience, what a student needs to hear versus what faculty versus staff they're different things. And training and support, of course, is going to be an ongoing need, and resourcing needs to be set aside for it. So we leave this from the leadership standpoint. You have to balance the agility in this rapidly evolving landscape, and make sure you're steadied, you're principled, and you're always keeping in mind the risk, the ethics, and values. So to wrap this up, the conclusion, the action items, the call to arms from our side, creating urgency rooted in purpose. I actually like crossing out the word urgency here, but I think urgency makes people more stressed and strained. And there is a bit of that, like you want people to feel the need to move quickly on this, that if we don't adapt, that there are potentially catastrophic consequences. But that urgency has to come with an idea of gaining purpose, of gaining alignment with the mission and understanding it. And I think that that's a point of emphasis that's critical from our side. The scalability, the idea that you want to implement tools that are able to be used across extremely diverse operations, departments, and areas of the university's scope, and that it creates collaboration, that scalability, because you have the uniformity, allows groups that might not have otherwise worked well together to find a way to do so. We want to focus on outcomes. We don't want it to be tools or features. That's always my number one thing. If somebody tells me that they have they just really want to use a particular AI tool, or they want a certain kind of automation, that's a bad way to start it. We want to focus on, what are the top level things that the board, the dean, the department, the team really needs in order to be more effective. And that's where you have to have those KPIs, the data that I continue to harp about, that provides the business intelligence. I mentioned the idea of making space for experimentation, making space for failure. You have to have that with AI, because there is no binary with it. Things are Rome is being built and then torn down and rebuilt in a day, sort of opposite of the old saying. So you have to be able to get feedback and refine it. And again, the most important thing, I think, from the CIO level, from the leadership level, is don't look at this as tools with a cost. Like, hey, my project cost, 60,000, 100,000, $250,000. It's what is the actual calculation? Like, if I have a staff of 72 people and we're getting 30% of their day back, like, what does that mean? If we are able to serve 45% more students with the same staff, what does that mean? Like, find the way to ensure that your investment has a return that is based on those outcomes. So that's the end from my side. I had written this as, it's, again, transformational leadership, not a technology project. And so I hope that's the takeaway is think about this AI not as technology, but as, how does my team work? How can I provide better support for students? And how can my institution thrive in the long term based on the actions that we take?
Thank you. QR code. Scan to learn more. Logos.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. If any of our virtual attendees have questions, feel free to throw them into the Zoom chat. If any in-person attendees have questions, let me know and I'll bring you the mic.
Hi, Philip Daudet. Um,
Hey,
earlier you
Philip.
talked about the data. Make sure you have good data. A lot of times that data needs to be combed through by humans to be kind of fixed. How do you get buy-in from employees to do more work as they're busy with everything else going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I do think a lot of times people will say, well, we're worried about AI. Are you making me write SOPs so that you can, replace me? What is my job going to be? Like, there is a bit of, we have to find the places where AI is not able to do, in 10 seconds what it takes many hours. And you just pointed out one of those things, which is one of the most important things you can have at any level is good, consistent, validated data. That is not something that an AI program, at least at this point, is able to go through and tell you that the data is correct. So for some folks, that becomes a shift in their job where you say, hey, did you used to spend time in 3 different, you had Qualtrics and Salesforce and something else, your email, and, add in some other homegrown SIS that the IT department built. You had like 4 or 5 different systems you were working in. You were copying and pasting it into places and trying to work with it. Let's make sure that that gets automated so that if your data oversight and validation of the data is a new portion of your job description, that we are finding the concurrent one. You can never just be, I'm going to pile it on, right? It can't be, hey, did you work 52 hours last week? Well, I need you to do all the data oversight. Now you need to work 60 hours. What's the old like Office Space? Like, can you go ahead and come in on a Sunday? It can't be that. Like that's part of the, like, we're going to reframe your job. It's going to change a little bit. There's still going to be some things that, you have to do in certain areas, but we need to find efficiencies so that you can do these new tasks. Does that address what you were looking for?
Seems like it. Anyone else questions? Looks like one just came in chat too. To read it out loud for those who are in the room, how can we ensure we're implementing AI usage in a way that streamlines and speeds up work, but also takes into account and supports the long-term professional development of our employees? I think we have to balance optimization with thinking critically about what parts of the job employees enjoy and value and how it affects our career growth structures, nurturing internal leadership pipelines.
100%. That's, said extremely well. Again, I'll go back to my case study, but it is one that it doesn't matter if it's a disability center, a tutoring center, a summer session program, admissions, financial aid, like everyone we've worked with, you can take a 30,000-foot view of some of these things. And that's where people started this work ostensibly for a particular reason, like a specialist that works with students with disabilities. Like they don't, I cannot imagine there's any version of them saying like, well, working directly with the student, that seems way less appealing than copying and pasting things out of a Google Sheet. Like that it should not be the way. So we're looking, when you're assessing workflow, looking for small or seismic wins, like we're trying to find ways to say like, we need to reshape our institution all the way through your team. And part of that is your job, like your job description and the bullets that came with it might have been one thing. That's going to shift. How do we tie this to you actually getting to do the work that you really enjoy? How do we provide you with a path? And that's, again, there's going to be places where people's jobs, I don't want to say eliminated is the wrong way of saying it, but like there are jobs that you are going to need less of. And I think that ties to the first question where people, it's not a matter of getting rid of, it's a matter of shifting. It's a matter of saying like, how do we create capacity? And this second question ties to me the most important, like make them the hero of the story. How do you tie this digital transformation, this scary like technology, how do you tie that to a way that they become more effective in their work, that they get a greater sense of meaning in their work, and they feel like they're contributing in alignment with whatever the university's mission is in order to advance that in this sort of challenging time. So I think you're right. Like it is definitely a juggling act to give people, sort of these, that's that competing way of looking at it where you're like, I need you to do certain things quicker. I need you to adopt some like radically changing platforms and tools, but I also want you to have some satisfaction that goes with that. And so it's there. That's why I think of it as leadership. That's why I think of it as communication. That's why I think of it as something that needs to be championed and kind of done on an individual level to provide these staff members, sort of some reassurance about where this is all going and how it affects them.
Question from the room. Thanks for your talk and coming today. Throughout your talk, we've talked about AI, and I've kind of made an assumption that we're talking about generative AI, kind of like a Gemini or something like that, or an enterprise version of it. Correct me if that's wrong. And I've been using those tools extensively. I find a lot of personal value in them, but one thing that is definitely true about them is that they're inconsistent. And so when I'm trying to imagine the series of steps in the playbook that you laid out, I'm struggling to imagine what the supposed end of integrating generative AI into actual work processes, what that could be, because you ask you ask Copilot the same question 10 times, you'll get different versions of the same answer or even wildly different answers several times in a row. And it's not a calculator. It's not something where if this, then that is applicable. So when you're talking about a business process, I struggle to think how you could actually integrate that and expect to get consistent and usable results without having to have someone check everything all the time.
No, that's right. Generative AI is often unreliable and does require checks. In honesty, while I always fold generative AI into this because there's a lot of great ways it can be utilized. I think some of the use cases and the best use cases I've seen are agentic ones, and I also fold in just the idea of using these tools for automations. And so what I mean by that is like when I think about the playbook, I'm not starting at how do I use agentic AI to create a chatbot to provide support to answer questions. I'm thinking if I have a staff of 3 that's getting, 75,000 emails over the course of the year, how can I make this more efficient? And it doesn't always have to be AI. It could be some other technology solution. It could be some other automation. And that's why I use the email example where it's like, I know people are, sometimes you're right. Sometimes groups will have to write the same email like 15 times to the same 15 students. Isn't there a way you could batch do that so that there's quicker messaging, even if it's a semi-customizable one? And so I would agree with you that like part of that challenge is that like AI in its infancy in a sense, even though it's, there's some mature aspects of it. It's not something where you can like set it and forget it. It's a mature product. You can just drop it in the way we did, again, websites, CRMs, other technology platform evolutions that we've seen over the past 15 to 20 years. It's something that is requiring babysitting. It requires constant monitoring. It requires, the checks for, whether it's the governance part of it to address the reviews and assessments. But yeah, I was speaking in my other examples a little bit less about generative and more about the idea of like LLMs, agentic orchestrations, and things like that can be utilized collectively and applied to workflows and processes to save time, whether it's pure AI or whether it's a platform of digital transformation. But I think that you're right. You have to divorce yourself of the like, hey, this is how I use ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or whatever it might be, and say, I'm assessing this business unit. I'm assessing this team. Where are they integrated in the way that I need them to be? Do they produce the data that I need across so and so? What part of their workflow can be made more efficient, and how do I do that assessment? And so I think we start more almost on the business process side in order to get to the technology solution.
Thank you very much. As much as I would like to keep asking for additional questions, we have gone a little over. So I will, oh no, you're good. Thank you again, Michael, for presenting. It was great. I'd say we have lots of great sessions, but the last thing we have today is our CIO's message and closing remarks. So if you're in person, feel free to take a little break. You've got about 10 minutes and then you can head on over to the main room. If you're online, you've got about 10 minutes and then you can join that Zoom meeting. So
if you did have a question I didn't get to, I assume my contact email somewhere on there, or you can track me down on LinkedIn. There are not a lot of Michael Taguchi's hanging around. You should be able to find me. I'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions or things like that, or just chat with you if there's a way I can help with some guidance and stuff.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Take care, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
The participants in the room gather their things and exit.